Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into William Wordsworth's 1802 classic, Alice Fell or Poverty. We're going to unpack how something as simple as a torn cloak can reveal these incredibly profound truths about poverty and, well, human empathy. It's all drawn right from Wordsworth's original text and analytical notes, so let's get into it.
Have you ever witnessed a stranger in desperate need and just wondered what small act could actually change their world? We're stepping right into a dark, rainy night in the early 19th century where Wordsworth confronts us with that exact question. Here's how we'll break this down today. First, the story of Alice Fell. Then we'll hit 4 core themes: poverty and helplessness, compassion and charity, childhood and innocence, and finally, humanity over wealth.
Starting with Section 1, the story of Alice Fell. Picture a stormy night in 1802. Our narrator is traveling in a horse-drawn carriage through a fierce, freezing rain. The narrative arc here moves at breakneck speed. We go from that suspenseful carriage ride to a mysterious, chilling cry in the dark. That leads directly to finding little Alice, realizing the tragedy of her torn cloak, and eventually reaching a heartwarming resolution at a local tavern.
Wordsworth tells us the journey kicks off under incredibly threatening clouds. The postboy is driving with what he calls fierce career, basically going incredibly fast, until this startling, piteous moan just cuts right through the howling wind. The narrator is instantly disturbed by the sound and actually forces the carriage to a dead stop. This immediately shows us just how sensitive he is to the suffering of others.
So they step out into the pitch black and find a little orphan girl, Alice Fell, sitting completely alone behind the carriage. Now, she doesn't give some long, drawn-out explanation for why she's there. She literally just screams, "My cloak!" She's weeping so loudly and bitterly, it's as if her pure, innocent heart is going to shatter right then and there.
It's a really harsh scene. Her cloak has gotten twisted up between the nave and the spoke of the carriage wheel. It is completely ruined. Wordsworth calls it a weather-beaten rag, which is devastating because this was her absolute only protection against the freezing rain. The narrator and the postboy literally have to physically untangle this miserable rag from the wheels.
Deeply moved by her distress, the narrator brings her into the warm carriage. He asks about her family and gets the heartbreaking news that she is fatherless and motherless. She's completely alone in the world. He realizes she isn't just crying over a piece of clothing, she's crying from the deep, crushing loneliness of poverty. So he takes her to a nearby tavern and gives the host money to replace the torn garment. He gives a simple instruction: buy as warm a cloak as man can sell, specifically made of thick duffel gray fabric. And wow, does it work. By the very next day, her grief is completely transformed into immense pride. The poem wraps up on this beautiful, uplifting note. The sorrow is entirely gone, and her dignity completely restored. That brings us to Section 2, theme, poverty and helplessness, specifically a fragile security. With the story fresh in our minds, let's look at how the poem builds this theme.
The crucial takeaway here is that the ruined cloak is way more than just a piece of fabric. It's a powerful symbol of her absolute helplessness. She's an impoverished orphan exposed to the harshest elements of life. When that cloak tears, it represents her fragile existence snapping. Those tears stem from a deep, terrifying realization that she lacks the most basic necessities, and worse, she has absolutely no protectors to shield her from the world.
Recognizing that intense vulnerability brings us right to Section 3, theme, compassion and charity, and the power of tangible acts of kindness. There is a really striking contrast in how the narrator reacts. First, there's the initial disturbance. He hears the cry, stops the carriage, and feels genuine pity. But the magic happens in his ultimate action. Wordsworth is hammering home a huge point here. True compassion is so much more than just feeling bad for someone in your heart. It requires a physical, tangible act of kindness, like actually buying a new cloak, to ease the pain of poverty and practically restore a person's dignity. Moving on to Section 4, theme, childhood and innocence, and how they are vulnerable yet inspiring. This is a massive cornerstone of Wordsworth's romantic ideals. Alice is the ultimate embodiment of pure innocence. She's suffering terribly from her situation, but she also naturally sparks this profound sense of responsibility and tenderness from the adult narrator. You see, because children are entirely dependent, their suffering in poverty is absolute. Wordsworth uses Alice's raw innocence to tug at our heartstrings, essentially proving that the purity of childhood absolutely demands our protection. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, theme, humanity over wealth, and finding nobility in simple acts. This really is the moral core of the message.
This illustrates one of the biggest beliefs of the Romantic movement. Actual, genuine human greatness, it has absolutely nothing to do with how much money you hoard or the political power you wield. True nobility lies in simple, everyday, quiet acts of caring for the less fortunate. By focusing his poem on a little girl's lost cloak instead of some epic, grand battle, Wordsworth completely elevates these common life experiences.
When you compare her two states of being, it perfectly captures the poem's power. A tiny financial investment from the narrator flips this child's worldview upside down. She goes from utter despair, weeping over a miserable rag, to immense pride and comfort, wrapped tightly in a warm new cloak. It just goes to show how effortlessly, how quickly, we can alter someone's entire reality.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought. Wordsworth wrote this over 200 years ago, but the duty to care for the helpless, that remains a massive, profound challenge for all of us today. Ask yourself, who are the Alice Fells in our modern society? And what cloaks can we offer to restore their dignity right now? I hope this deep dive into Wordsworth's classic gave you some fresh perspectives and something truly meaningful to reflect on.